Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lit Chick on a Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Paone. I'm here today with Alison Hammer to talk about her new book, Little Pieces of Me. Hey, Alison, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for
Hi.
having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, us too. Congratulations again on the release of Little Pieces of Me. I understand this is the it's 1 month birthday out in the world.
It is. It is. I looked at the date and I was like, wow, the 13th, like it's been a month. It's crazy. It's time is weird, I think, especially during the pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. I think we've all lost all sense of time, which is, fine, right? We don't need any sort of normalcy. And it's great because we're talking about your book, which has this very surreal situation. Before we get started, I'm just going to introduce you, and then we'll get going on talking about Little Pieces of Me. So Alison Hammer, the founder of the Every Damn Day Writers online group, Alison Hammer has been spinning words to tell stories since she learned to talk. A graduate of the University of Florida and the Creative Circus in Atlanta, she lived in 9 cities before settling down in Chicago. During the day, Alison is a VP creative director at FCB Chicago, but on nights and weekends, you can find her writing upmarket women's fiction like Little Pieces of Me. In a starred review, Library Journal says Little Pieces of Me is a novel that explores the true meaning of family in a timely, thought-provoking story of identity and self-discovery. And Booklist says this hurt and love-filled novel will enthrall fans of women's fiction. Alison, welcome and congratulations again.
Thank you. It's so funny, like hearing somebody talk about me.
Yeah, I know. It's always weird, especially when it's like you're like standing right next to them. We hope that it's a little less awkward because it's online, but like,
yeah, no, I love it. It's still very surreal.
That's good. I hope you never get sick of it. But yeah, so congratulations on the release of Little Pieces of Me. Let's start by just having you tell us about the book. Give us your elevator pitch. Give us a little clue.
Absolutely. So Little Pieces of Me is a story of identity, family secrets, and mother-daughter relationships. It's about a woman who finds out she's in her 40s and she gets an email from familytree.com, which is kind of like an ancestry.com.
Yes.
And through the email, she gets an alert about a parent-child match with a man who is not her biological father. Yes. And that kind of sends her on a search of identity and meaning for what it means, the new information means for herself, for her relationship with her mother and her late father. So the book goes in the timeline of, present day as she's making that discovery and processing what it means for her. Mm-hmm. And then it also goes back to 1974, where we see her mom, her dad, and her DNA dad when everything went down.
Which I love. I mean, I'm a sucker for dual timeline novels. And that's like, I think there's just a great sense of understanding kind of everyone's perspective in complicated situations. One of the things my writing group always says, which makes for a great novel, is a problem where there's no easy solution and there's no good solution. And I think this is an example of one of those big situations where, there's really there's no good answer. There's no way to, there's no easy solution. There's no simple answer. Everything's complex. And we'll get into that. Tell us a little bit about what inspired this. I mean, I got one of these DNA tests from my in-laws for Christmas, and my husband and I still haven't done it. And now I'm like a little bit afraid to do it. I was actually like, I almost had a thought of like bringing it downstairs and doing the swab while we were having our interview.
Oh my God, I love it. You should do it today.
Yeah, right. But what was the idea behind it?
So yeah, it's something, you're saying about easy solutions, and it is something that's difficult, and it's something that's happening to more and more people. Like, it is crazy how many people I hear from where this happened to them or happened to someone they know. And it happened to a friend of mine, which is where the idea came from. So books take a long time to get out into the world. So this was back in 2017, and I was going out with a bunch of friends, and I walked into the bar, and I saw a friend of mine, and I said, hi. And she's like, you'll never guess like what I found out on ancestry.com. And I went through a few wrong guesses. I guessed some current and historical political figures that I knew she wouldn't want to be related to. Whoa. And she's like, kept saying no. I'm like, okay, well, tell me. And she told me she had gotten a match with a man who wasn't her father. Her father had passed away a few years before. And at first she, thought, no way, human error, like it must be a mistake. But she did some Googling and found out that this man went to college the same place and time her parents did when she was conceived. And it was like that moment that I was just like, this story sparked. And it's not her story, but that was what inspired it.
That's so great. And is that sort of, so it sounds like the plot and like just the situation was really the inspiration behind this particular one. Is that your usual entry point for a novel? Or do you tend to come in, like, do you tend to go from a large picture, like I want to write a book about a person who has this, DNA issue, or do you kind of think, oh, I want to write a book that's set in Chicago, or do I want to write a book about a character like that? What's your usual entry point into a novel? Or do you even have one? Is it different every time?
That's such a good question. I think that it usually is like an instigating thing. Like with this, it's the DNA test. And it's funny. And I'm curious with you, what you think with your experiences, but for me, sometimes I don't know until I finish writing the book what it's about.
Oh, 100%. I have no idea. I think I know what it's about, but I don't. I'm like in the midst of one now and I'm still not sure what it's about.
I know. And it's like, I'm always so impressed with people who are like, these are the themes of my novel. And like, sometimes I have to explore that. And for me, the theme of my debut, You and Me and Us, and this book ended up being kind of the same. And I didn't realize it until, for both books, I didn't realize till after I finished, but they're both really about mothers and daughters. And, I thought, in both my debut, You and Me and Us, and Little Pieces of Me, the relationship with a father is so much the instigator. With You and Me and Us, it was that that Tommy, the father, was sick. Here, it's that the father is not the biological father. But really, what the heart of the story with both books is about is mothers and daughters. And believe me, my mom, and she might be watching. So hi, Mom, if you are.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Allison's mom. She was like, my mom's probably watching too. So hi, Mom.
I love it. Our mom's the best, but in life, in fiction, a wonderful mother-daughter story about mothers and daughters who love each other and are totally get along doesn't make the best fiction. But when my mom realized I'd written a second book about a mother and daughter with a difficult situation, she's like, really? Come on. But we have a great relationship and she's amazing.
But that's why it's fiction, right? I mean, I'm the same way. My mother just read my draft of my novel, which is all about mother-daughter relationships and very awkward, very complicated situations. I'm like, just remember, this is not our relationship, but nobody, an easy relationship does not make for a good novel. And you took the next question right out of my mouth, which is, this is really, it's a paternity issue, but it's a book about mothers and daughters and family relationships of all kinds, and how our family relationships really relate back to us and inform our own relationship with ourselves and our identity. So what is it about family relationships? Because I'm the same way. I'm a sucker for a complicated family relationship. What is it about these relationships that you find so intriguing? Because there's romance in your book, but it's not the overarching thing. And there are friendships, but that's not the overarching thing. It's really where we come from in that family unit. And so I'd just love to hear, what intrigues you about that.
Yeah. And, and again, it's so interesting, even just psychologically, why I tend to gravitate toward these types of books. And I like to read them as well. I'm a sucker for tearjerkers. I cry at commercials, at TV shows, at anything. And I love things that make me feel. And I just think there's so much complexity and depth in family dynamics and relationships. And the way I kind of summarize what I write, because my books are pretty different, but at the heart of them, I think they're about family and friendship and loss and love and all of the dynamics and complexities. And with Little Pieces of Me, it really is about the way we define ourselves and our family and our role in our family, and the structure of our family is such a way that we try to put ourselves in boxes. And I think that, through this book and the character's growth, I feel like I grew a little bit along with the character. And, she realizes that she's not one of these things. She's all of these things. And your DNA is definitely a part of who you are, but so is how you were raised and your experiences. And, the other interesting thing about family and the dynamics that came up in both books, and it's almost easier to talk about from my debut, but in my debut, there's a moment where Cece, the 14-year-old girl, is talking to her dad and not happy about a secret that has been kept from his past. And she's like, but you're my dad. And he's like, but I'm also my own person. Yeah. And I think that as children, even adult children, we still think of our parents as our parents. Their life started when our life started. And I think that, in this book, my character kind of comes to the realization that, you know, her mother had a whole life before she was born, and there were, you know, great things she did, and there were mistakes that she did, and, you know, there's a big conversation about forgiveness and who owes who what. And our parents don't owe us explanations for what they did before we were born. And even the bad things that they are not bad, but even maybe the mistakes they made led us to existing. And so it's just like, you know, I think that there's complexity about that with like the individuals on their own. And then when you bring them together in a family, it just creates lots of fodder for fiction.
Yes, I love it. That's exactly right, because that is the thing. Our parents are people, and I'm a new mom, and it's something that I think about. I'm like, well, I'm a person, and someday I'm going to have these conversations with my daughter about, you know, like, I had this whole other life before you, especially, you know, like, I think we're in an interesting point culturally that we sort of are more open about this, but the generations before us are not. Like, there's definitely that growth of like, people sometimes are just less used to talking openly about those hard, squishy issues. Whereas like today, we're kind of like, hi, let me tell you, like, you know, what I discovered about my feelings, and like this, you know, this like emotional and psychological revelation that I have. And that's just not been typical until, you know, our generation. So that juxtaposition makes for really interesting conflict in and of itself. Right.
I totally agree. I think that's some of the difference of cultural context. Like with mothers and daughters, you know, part of the reason I think the relationship is so fascinating is that it's really like no other relationship, because you have that, like, you know, I don't know about you and your mom, me and my mom, like, I swear, like, you know, there's so many times where she's like, you're just like me and I'm so sorry. Like we are
100%.
And I'm also like her in some wonderful ways. But I think that, like, you know, we can have the same personality traits, but they can be expressed differently because we grew up in different times. We grew up in different situations. We grew up in different, like, we're not the same person, but our similarities bring us together and are different, or can push us apart. Not my mom and I in particular, but mothers and daughters in general. And I think there's also a level for most, you know, and I know that there are definitely mothers and daughters that like in the book that have difficult relationships, but there's a safety there. Like, I know, like, I'll snap at my mom, I'm sorry, mom, but more than anyone else, because I know that unconditional love that it'll be okay. So it's just, there's a lot of good fodder there.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And let's dive into the characters a little bit more. So Paige is your protagonist, but and she's written in, so let's start with point of view. So Paige is written in first person. And I love how you just do then and now, which I love. I love that you don't like specifically, like, we do know the years, but like, I love that can kind of like grow, you know, you can sort of dive into this book and it could be whenever you are reading it is the now, and then is sort of vaguely in the past, even though we know, like, we have context that it's in 1975.
I did math to make sure that all the numbers worked out, and thank goodness for copy editors who caught a few mistakes. But
the math is the hardest thing. I actually have like a table. I have because I'm terrible at math, so I have a spreadsheet that has all the ages, and I actually had to make a major plot change because I was just like, oh, and then like 7 years go by, and then this person is born, but I was like, oh no, she has to be born like the same year that this other big thing happens, because I don't understand math. So
I know I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
But anyway, so Paige is in first person, and in the past, where we have Betsy and we have Andy's perspectives, and they're both told in third person. And it's interesting that you bring Andy in. Can you tell us first, just, you know, why you decided to include all 3 points of view, and is there a reason behind why you decided, you know, Paige is a little closer. It's like very close first. It's really her story. And then we see sort of an omniscient kind of view of the past. I care about your choices behind that.
You're the first person to like ask about it or even reference like the different points of view.
And, oh, really?
Yeah. And I wasn't sure, like, when I first started writing it, like, it felt right. Like, I think that, like, with point of view, sometimes, like, there's sometimes a moment at the beginning of a project where it's like, what do I do? And one of my projects I'm working on now, I wrote a first chapter. The first chapter, I wrote it in first and in third to like kind of like look at it. But it just felt right. it felt like I wanted to Paige to be in present in the moment and kind of like inside of her feelings, because it really is about her really emotional growth. And for her parents, her biological parents in the past, I wanted to show both of their perspectives. But I also was just thinking about the structure. Like, I like the simplicity of now and then. I didn't want to be like Paige, like 2018, Betsy, 1974, Andy, 1974. And I wanted them to be able to be in the same chapter. But an interesting little tidbit, because we were talking about the timelines weaving. When I first wrote the book, it was written in 3 parts. So I had part 1 was like present day, where Paige makes the discovery. Part 2 was back in 1974. And then part 3 was as she's, processing.
So it wasn't braided at first.
It wasn't. And my agent read it and she's like, it's great. But part 2, the 1974 part, has this like driving energy. Because there's these 3 characters. 2 of them end up having sex, which we know, but we don't know when or where or why, or anything like that. And so it was her idea to take the book apart and put it back together again. And once I got over like the anxiety of how much work that would be, like it just really, like, again, you're getting to understand Betsy as Paige does. And so I think that I think it ended up working out perfectly.
What was that process like of changing it over from, these chunks of time to braided? Was it as simple as ordering the chapters, or did you go back and retool the plot completely to make it kind of happen?
So it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. What I did is I usually have my agent has me do like a roadmap. So I had like a 50-page outline that kind of went chapter by chapter and talked about just bullet points of the things that happen in there. It just helps to look at it from that high level. What I did is I put the, the now in red and the then in blue. And I went all arts and crafts. I cut it out and I like pasted things together. Cleared out my kitchen table, and I started playing. But and I used Post-it notes. I have a picture I should share.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, I used Post-it notes to mark where a new scene would have to happen. And there was about 6 new chapters I had to write, but it was shocking at how well it fit together. So I feel like the story was meant to be told that way.
Cool.
But sometimes it takes someone else outside of you, which is why I'm so grateful for agents and editors and my critique partner who help make the book what it can be.
I love that. And that is why we love those people. It takes a village, like everything else. I love the color coordination thing. Now, do you usually start with an outline, or are you a pantser or a plotter? That's always the question. Do you usually start with the outline, or do you just start writing and then kind of go and build the outline after?
So I used to call myself a plotzer because I was like a plot, plot with a little bit of dancing. But my critique partner and my co-writer just informed me that I'm officially a plotter. And I think that I do think that when you plot, there's still so much room for pantsing on within the chapters. And I think that there are moments where the characters will reveal things, or there's still freedom. But Jenny Nash, who runs Author Accelerator, she has a 2-tier outline that I use, and I'm again very math averse. So Brady Godfrey, my co-writer, she is very good at this has to happen at 25%, this has to happen at 50%, and I'm just I can't handle that. But Jenny, her inside outline is more logic based, and it's more because one of the things that I hate hearing the most is that oh, it doesn't move the story forward. That's I'm but it's such a beautiful chapter. And so what she does helps avoid that. And so it's make sure that everything is linked. So I use that before I start writing. But I think the more I've written, the more I've become a plotter.
I love it. Cool. And let's go back for a second just to the main characters again, because one thing I love about this book is how balanced the perspective of, and these are not perfect people. They're very imperfect people making very imperfect choices. And I think it would be really easy to not like them, in some ways, but I found myself just not liking maybe the choice rather than not liking them. I think you did a great job of showing this balanced perspective of everyone's point of view and really justifying that it wasn't, it's not necessarily a bad intention behind the action. It's just a complex, sort of impossible choice to make for everyone, right? Like everybody's got some gray area. And I'm wondering if you had was any one character's perspective or any character easier to get into versus the others? Did anyone really present a challenge to you, or were they all kind of like, you just knew that these three people had to tell their stories and in order for the whole to make sense?
I love that question. And I'm so glad that you think that, because I tried really hard to make, Paige, I think I had the hardest time making her likable, because I think that when people have, and through reviews, I think a lot of people have a difficulty with Elizabeth as an adult.
Yeah.
And when they get to know Betsy, hopefully their opinion changed a little bit. Some people still don't like Betsy and Elizabeth. And I understand that, but I hope that people can, look at her with kind eyes for like what she'd been through. But with Paige, it was difficult because I had moments where people were like, my critique partner and some of my early readers were like, she cannot be like, woe is me. She cannot be just like complaining about her situation. She has to be proactive and like doing things to change it. And so with the present day characters were the most challenging, I think, also because they were inspired by actual people. Yep. And so I wanted to be careful that I was not being too close to the person, because I didn't want anyone to think that it was, my friend's story. Yep. There's like a series of books. I had the ebooks about personality, like dictionaries, and like positive. It was like positive personality traits and negative personality traits. And I went through those books for the present day characters, and I really thought about like trying to make them, full and well-rounded. And I think that when people have flaws, if you understand where they're coming from, and what made them that way, then it makes them, it helps to make them not unlikable. Yep. But as far as like the easiest character to write, I loved writing Andy. Like he was just wonderful.
He might have been my favorite too, to be honest. I mean, like, I just felt like, I felt a lot for him. That's cool. Can you tell us a little bit why?
I don't know. There was something that I think that because the characters in the then sections were 100% my imagination, there was some more freedom with him. There was just something about him that I was just like, I like him. Like, I wish he was real. Like, I would love to go get a drink with Andy. Like, I think he and I think that his struggles, and I don't want to say too much, but his struggles with identity and and just what he was doing and what he was dealing with, it made him, I had a lot of empathy for him, and I liked him. He's charming, and he's like a very likable guy that has layers. And I think that the layers and the complexity and the secrets, there's a lot in the book about secrets in general. And I think that it was just fun to see those manifest.
Yeah, I love it. So great. Let's talk some other things. Let's talk setting for a moment, because the bulk of the book takes place in Chicago. You in your bio, you've lived in a lot of different places, and you ended up settling in Chicago. And I'd love to hear what it is about Chicago that you love so much, so that you chose it not only as a place to live, but as a place where to set your books. I'd love to hear what inspires you so much about it.
So setting is not my strength. I think that even as a reader, like if there's a big paragraph of setting, I tend to just like skim it. So it's something where like I give enough details, but it's not like it doesn't play a huge role in my writing. And so because of that, I think it helps to have places that I'm really familiar with. So like I can put myself in the character's shoes walking down State Street, or and so there's a little bit of that. So this book, I'm from Chicago. I'm originally from St. Louis. Chicago's home. And because I'm from Chicago, I live in Chicago. It felt right to have Paige be there. Where she was from, I wanted it to be someplace that was driving distance. And because I'm from St. Louis, it's just that level of reality with like the places that they go, and just the feeling of being there. And with Andy, adult Andy, I went to University of Kansas for 2 years. I ended up graduating from University of Florida, but I'm familiar with, the campus, and again, just like it helps to have that sense of familiarity. And then I've not lived in Naples, Florida, but I grew up going there on vacation. My grandparents had a condo there, and it's actually funny. The hotel where Paige and her friends stay, the Edgewater Beach Hotel. When I was young, when I was 8, I was like, this place is paradise and I want to have my honeymoon here.
Yeah.
I am single, not married, but I feel like if I do get married, I have a little bit more extravagant taste now and want to go someplace more exotic than Naples, Florida. But like that hotel is a special place in my heart and my memory. So it's just nice to kind of have like pay homage to it a little bit and let readers meet those places and see them through my character's point of view.
Love it. I love it. And you're in Florida right now, right?
I am. My dad and my sister live in Destin. And one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that working remotely, I can work from anywhere. And so I'm here. I've got a writing retreat next week with some friends. And but yeah, it's just taking advantage of having a Florida offshoot.
I love it. I will be jealously, stalking your adventures and living vicariously through you. Speaking of work, you have a big day job. You are a VP creative director at a huge advertising agency. And I know you had to shuffle around your day today because you had a big work presentation. So obviously you are used to multitasking and writing novels is no small feat either. So how do you structure your time and your energy so that you're able to do this? I'd love to hear more about your writing schedule and your work schedule.
Sometimes better than others. So thank you again for being like flexible. I was like, and I've been a big fan of Mighty Blaze from the beginning. My first book came out 3 weeks into the pandemic, and I love everything that you guys are doing to just help support authors and bring authors and readers together. So I was so excited to come talk to you. And I like looked at the calendar and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like in middle of a client presentation. So some days are more challenging than others. And I think that the word balance, I've had a lot of conversation about it because my first book was about a workaholic mother and like struggling with that work and life balance. Mm-hmm. And I think the word balance is a misnomer. And I think that it's a pressure that society puts on us, particularly women, to have that balance. Yep. And I do try really hard to separate. Sometimes I'll have to take a lunch hour to do something like this, which I love. But I don't write during the day. I separate. I almost have like an advertising frame of mind and then a fiction frame of mind. Mm-hmm. So I work during the day and write nights and weekends. Yep. The last month has been really busy, so my writing time has been diminished because my work time has like expanded. But it can be challenging. I say that I have 2 full-time jobs, but I love both of them. Mm-hmm. And I know that I'm really lucky with the book stuff. I mean, this is a dream come true. So I'm in the moments when it's stressful, I just remind myself that I'm living my dream. So, I can't really complain.
I love it. I mean, to me, like I've always been someone who wears a lot of hats. Like I actually can't do just one thing. I know there are people out there that can, but I can't. I'm like the ultimate, like I call it, Jen of all trades, master of none, but they all kind of help each other. And I'm interested to hear how your work, like I love the switching brains, and I'd love to know a little bit more about how you do that. Like do you have any tricks or tips for like how you transition from one role to another, and how do you think these 2 roles complement each other? Because I have to imagine that those 2 sides of you work together, right? Because you're getting things done, you're getting books published, you're getting, you're obviously doing really well in your advertising career. Like how, give us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So before the pandemic, when we were back in the office, I used music as like the differentiator. And so sometimes I would stay at the office, like I would finish up work, and then I have a playlist. My like happy writing place is Starbucks. Nice. With like, as far as noise level, like if something is too quiet, I find myself listening for distraction. And if something is too loud, I get distracted. So I think the perfect level of like a coffee shop is that perfect like buzz of energy. Yep. My books can be tearjerkers, and I do cry while writing them. So it got a little awkward when I was like sitting in the corner, like crying into my laptop. But I have a playlist that's like songs saved at Starbucks. And so I have a playlist that I really only listen to when I'm writing. And so that kind of, that helped to trigger my brain a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I do think that advertising impacts my fiction. And really like at the core, they're the same because an ad tells a story.
Yep.
And so I think about it as storytelling.
Yep.
With advertising, you have to write accessibly because you're talking, you know, sometimes you have to write to the lowest common denominator because you want people to understand what you're saying. And so I think that my advertising growing up and writing, you know, I've been a writer my whole life, but I've been in advertising for too many years to count, more than 20 years. And I think that that conversational tone has impacted like my style of writing. So I do think that they're linked. But you know, again, I try my best to separate them and to leave, like back before the pandemic, I would spend like 8 hours at Starbucks on the weekend. And I would just, you know, with writing, I feel like when you dive in, like just having those big blocks of time are just inspiring and I love them.
Yes, I'm dealing without the big blocks of time right now. And let me tell you, I prefer the big blocks of time.
Oh my God,
They're so much better. So curiously, and let's do a question. Anita, would you want to write full time?
I don't know. Like that's something people have asked, and I love advertising. I love what I do, and where I am now in my career, I'm a creative director, so I'm helping people that are, you know, doing more of the creating, and I love that. I love the mentorship. I love the growth. I love pushing and helping people. So I don't think that I would ever want to do it full time. I would love to maybe find a little bit of a better balance, but right now, again, like, you know, fiction is such a passion and it's a dream. And if I had to choose one or the other, like I don't know if I'd be able to afford choosing writing. So I'm very fortunate to have a job that I love that has flexibility. So maybe like someday in the future, but right now, I'm happy being able to do both.
Well, I say yay for complexity and yay for multifaceted careers. I think that's a great, you know, I think it's something that's not talked about enough, kind of, especially in the creative world. Like I've been in a million different creative careers and there's always that pressure of like, well, you can't do anything else because if you do anything else, then you're not a real, you know, XYZ. And I've never fit into that one thing. Like, so personally, I love it. I'm like all for it. Let's have those multidimensional careers that like so,
and it's hard to be like a full-time writer. Like it's, you know, unless you have like another source of income or somebody else, it's like, or you're like a superstar. Like it's a, you know, you have to be passionate and love it to do it because it takes so much time. It takes so much effort and rejection and like, you know, so it has to be a passion point. But again, like I think that I learn things from my advertising life that I can put into fiction, and I learn things from my fiction experience that I can put into advertising. And they're both creative expressions. And like you said, I think hopefully it makes me more well-rounded.
And I do think I want to go back to what you said about your advertising experience informing your style, because you do have this very conversational, very easy, it's very casual, your writing style. You know, I don't get the sense that like you're like worrying about every single word choice, which I kind of love, you know, just like get the story out and like you have this really just natural flow of how you write. And I'm wondering, is that kind of how it comes out, or is that the result of like a lot of editing? And, you know, on that end, are you kind of an underwriter or are you an overwriter? Do you have?
I'm probably an overwriter, but I think that, and I love that you said that. So thank you. I take that as a compliment that it feels that way. Because I think that's a goal. And I think that like, that's the difference between literary and upmarket where like, you know, and so thank you. So my first book I ever wrote, which is currently in a drawer, took me 15 years to finish writing. And that is because I like obsessed over it as I was going and I edited it as I was going and like it just took forever. And so I would not have a very good career if I took 15 years to write every book I wrote. And so in 2016, I did NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, and where you are challenged to write 50,000 words in the month of November. And I'm very competitive against myself. I have a sleep app that rates my sleep quality every night. Like I'm very competitive. I'm very strange.
I know. I'm with you. I get that. I feel that.
That energy of like, I have to meet this goal, and the camaraderie and the energy of so many people creating really drove me. But I had this philosophy that I finish first and I don't edit until the end. And so it's, you know, a shitty first draft, sometimes more shitty than less than others. But
as we all do. Right?
I know.
You gotta write those shitty first drafts.
But I try not to stop. If I have something I need to come back and research, like I'll say, like in this book, I was like, he sings a funny karaoke song in all caps, and like I'm like, I'll come back for it later.
Yep.
But I do something a lot of people think is crazy, and and we'll see if I keep doing this, but I retype my second drafts. So I almost use my first draft as like a really long outline, because I feel like if I go back and read, I might tweak a word, but if I'm retyping the sentence, I might think about it differently. And I really pay attention to the flow and to the rhythm of words. And I think that really helps. The other thing that I do a lot, which is like my biggest writing advice for any writer, whether you're writing an email or a novel, is to read things out loud. And I've always done that. And it's interesting. My dad, we were talking about a TV show once and how the writing was terrible, and it only lasted a season, maybe even less than a season.
What's the TV show?
It was called like Blood and Oil or something, and it was on right after or before This Is Us, and it was like just the contrast between like writing that feels effortless and writing that feels written. And we were talking about it, and my dad, because I always read out loud, but he explained it to me, which like was kind of like a really aha moment, that when you read something, just like reading, it goes from your eyes to your brain, and that's it. Well, when you read it out loud, it goes from your eyes to your brain, to your mouth, to your ears, to your brain. And so you have 5 chances to catch something that sounds or feels wrong. So I do hope that, like, I think that reading out loud hopefully helps with it feeling effortless, but it was not.
I love that. No, that's like great writing advice for all time. And it's cool that you were able to, I'm with you on the, like, sometimes it can take a long time to get the projects out, to get it. And sometimes you got to just really challenge yourself to finish, to put, to say, okay, it's done. I need to stop tweaking it. It's time to get out. And it's cool that Nanowrimo kind of spurred that. And on that note, you are very involved in several online writer communities, and you're the founder of Every Damn Day Writers. Can you talk a little bit about, tell us what Every Damn Day Writers is, and maybe give us a hint of some of, a little info about some of the other communities that you're involved in?
Yeah, one of the things that I like, if I had like a slogan or anything that I say that I believe the most, it's that writing is not a solo sport. And I think that like writing can feel very solitary, but writing, the community is what makes it, like, it's what I love. And then now that my books are out in the world, the reading community, I feel the same way about it, but they're just that connection I love. And it's very, it's such a long and hard process with writing. That there's no rule book, and there's no, like, it's very difficult to do on your own. And so I'm a member of Women's Fiction Writers Association, and that I credit that group for giving me my foundation and helping me and giving me a place to ask the dumb questions and to learn and to, meet other writers. But when I was querying, there was a querying group, and it helped with the support, and like, only other writers who are querying understand that you can be happy to get a rejection, because a rejection is better than silence. There are such, like, every stage has such unique stresses and difficulties and excitement that it really helps to surround yourself by people who are going through the same thing. And when I signed with my agent, I realized that there was a whole nother level of difficulty. And one of my friends reached out and was like, you can't complain about the process or anything when you have an agent, to people who are trying to have an agent. So I started a group called Sub Support Group with writers who are on submission to support a different challenge. The 2020 debut. So yeah, you asked about, but there are a lot of groups.
I love it. No, and you can go to Alison's website and find out more about so many of these, which is why I asked, because I know there's a lot of them that you're involved in. And I'm impressed with that, because I can barely like update my Instagram. Like,
that's a struggle. But yeah, I think community makes it all go round. And with me, I do believe in writing every day as a theory. Sometimes it doesn't always in practice. And I think it is important to forgive yourself when you can't. But Every Damn Day Writers came from the Nanowrimo experience. And during that month, we were checking in and having daily check-ins. And that accountability and camaraderie was so great that when the month ended, we didn't want the group to end. So through different evolutions, now we're over 500 women writers. We have 8 moderators, and every day there's a different prompt or something to get people just talking and checking in.
Awesome. I love that. And everybody, obviously we're posting links here so you can go and you can be a part of it, right? I assume it's open. It's and you have some great writer, like I mean, your acknowledgments page was like 15 pages long. And I always read the like author's notes and the acknowledges. That's kind of like my favorite part. I'm a musician too. I'm a songwriter. So like your liner notes were always like, that was always the thing. I was like, as soon as I get to write the liner notes and like the author note, like then I feel like I've made it. But can you tell us a little bit about some of your writer communities offline? Like, do you have like some special groups that, you're a part of that like keep you going, or special writing partnerships or critique partnerships that are really useful to you?
So I have, a group of writers in Chicago. We call ourselves Slice of Fiction because we go out for pizza like before pandemic. That was just what we did.
I love that, Slice of Fiction.
But we met through different like conferences in town. And I've got, a lot of my relationships are online. But that's just because like of the state of the world and where we live. And now we're not limited. Right. But I do have a critique partner, Brady Godfrey. Her book is her debut, Imposter, is coming out in June, next June. And it's interesting. We started out meeting in an online group. She lives in Utah. I live in Chicago. I'm single. She's married with 4 kids. Like, we're as different as can be, but our brains work the same way sometimes. Sometimes it feels like we're sharing a brain. And she says, which I agree with, that sometimes it's like we know each other's projects almost as well as we know our own. Yes. There's a line in Little Pieces of Me that 2 people in reviews have called out as being their favorite. I'm like, Brady, you wrote that. I'm pretty sure. But we actually took our partnership to a new level. And we just a few weeks ago announced we have a book coming out together. So I'm Alison and she's Brady. Yep. So we have Allie Brady is our pen name. And our book is coming out. It's called The Beach Trap. Yep. And it'll be out from Berkeley in summer of 23. So I don't know how, like 2 years, it seems so long to wait, but we're really excited.
Can you tell us a little bit about The Beach Trap? Because I was like, oh, this is like totally my jam. I'm such a sucker for anything with like a beach.
Yeah. So Brady and then 2 of our other writing friends are flying in on Sunday. We rented a beach house to do research and to work on our second draft. But it's called The Beach Trap, and it is about 2 estranged half sisters. So it's been 15 years since they've seen or spoken to each other. And when their father passes away, they both inherit a rundown beach house in Destin, Florida. Cool. And so the book is told from, I write one of the sisters and Brady writes the other. And and it goes through the summer as they are repairing the house and their relationship. And they both have a love interest because, why not?
Of course. What's that process been like for you, writing with a partner as opposed to on your own? I love the idea of each of you taking one of the points of view. That's just like, that's a cool twist on that. And how do you guys work? Do you send each other, like, do you write you write a chapter and then you send it to her and she writes a chapter, or how is it working?
Yeah. So it's fascinating. And I'm actually working both projects I'm working on are co-writing projects at the moment, and they're both very different. But with Brady, we plot like severely. Like we spent a lot of time on the plot and coming up with our characters, their backstories and everything together, and the outline of the book and how it would work. But the way we've been doing it is that we each, because we both have full-time jobs and other responsibilities and solo projects. Yep. So we each write a chapter a week. So every week we write one chapter and then read the other's chapter and edit it. Cool. And so we're both editing each other's as we go. And so we both have, our editor was said she couldn't tell it was written by 2 people. Awesome. But I think that because it's different characters, it gives a little bit of permission for it to be a little bit different. Yep. And then we edit the next one. So we are on our last chapter this week. And then next week we're going to be at the beach house doing research and starting our second draft.
Cool. Well, we will be on the lookout for that, as well as, can you tell us about the other project you're working on, or is it?
Yeah. So I had an idea. I love music. I'm not a musician, but I'm a big music fan. And I had an idea about writing a novel about a musician and having an album full of original music to go along with it.
Cool.
So Stephen Kellogg is a musician, singer-songwriter who I'm a big fan of, and he's become a great friend.
Cool.
And he's also an author. His book, Objects in the Mirror, a book of essays, came out this summer. And so I reached out to him to see if he would be interested, and he was. And so it's been great. We started last July working on coming up with a plot and everything together. And we're doing that a little bit differently, where we have weekly calls. Every Thursday during lunchtime, we have a call where we go over what's coming next. But I draft it and then put it into a shared document where he edits it and modifies it. So it's a little bit of like, we both have like moments where we like get into it, and then I take the lead a little bit on the novel, and he'll take the lead, of course, in the music. So
cool. I love it. I love it. I mean, I'm a musician, I'm a songwriter, so like that's like totally my jam.
Yes.
I love it. That sounds like a great project. I'm super interested to hear more about that as it progresses, and kudos to you on both. Let's go back to Little Pieces of Me for a second, of course, because that's what we're here talking about. Can you do you have an independent bookstore that you want to give a shout out to and maybe direct people to buy the book through?
Yeah. So we partnered with 3 different bookstores for my launch event, and they were all wonderful to work with and great. Warwick's was in La Jolla. Cool. Volumes Books is one of my favorite indie bookstores in Chicago. Also Madison Street Books. They're both great. There's so many. I'm lucky to live in Chicago where there are so many wonderful ones. And then Oxford Exchange in Tampa. I believe they still have some signed copies left there too.
Cool. And so feel free, everyone, to go online. Obviously, the bookstores are doing such a great job of shipping things. We want to support independent bookstores. We want to have, now that we're finally, hopefully, going to be able to go back into places once we're all vaxxed and, everything like that, then we can go in and support our stores in person. Before we go, we're going to do a couple lightning questions.
Okay.
Alison, what is there a specific book or books that made you want to become a writer?
Oh, I love that. I will say that the first book I saw myself as in a character was Jennifer Weiner, Good in Bed. I think that she and Jodi Picoult are like kind of 2 of my lifelong hero writers.
Nice. I love that. What book from your childhood do you remember most vividly?
So I inhaled Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley High. Those were my jam. But there was also a book called Tallahassee, and I mentioned it, and somebody found it that I'd forgotten about. But that was another book that I have very fond memories of when I was a kid.
Cool. What's the best piece of writing advice you've ever gotten, and what's the worst piece of writing advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, that's really good. I think my favorite advice comes from Jodi Picoult, who again is one of my literary idols. And she says that you can edit a bad page, but you can't edit a blank page. So I think that's my favorite piece of advice.
Cool.
The worst advice is, oh goodness.
Or it doesn't. If you've gotten no bad advice, feel free to not answer that. I think there's a lot of bad advice out there.
I think that because I work in advertising, I'm used to taking hearing it. I think that the biggest thing with advice is if it's hard advice, to maybe think about what the problem is and not what their solution they're telling you. I had somebody with my debut say in their review, and I had it memorized. They were like, "Dear Alison, I'd like you to ask yourself why you're telling this story, and then ask yourself if anyone else would care." Yeah. And so he literally, not the right reader for me, but I'm not so I guess for bad advice, let it go unless you hear it from multiple people.
I love that. What do you hope readers will take away from Little Pieces of Me, and what do you hope they'll take away from your work in general?
My goal is to make people feel things. I would love to move people. I feel guilty sometimes for the tears, but I think that's a great sign that they've connected emotionally. Yep. As far as what to take away from this book, I think the 2 things are that our identity is made of so many things. We're not just one thing. We're a collection of the things that make us and our experiences and the people that we love and that love us, and that our parents are people too, which we talked about earlier.
I love it. Have you taken one of these DNA tests?
Yes, and I wish I had. I don't know if I have it near me. I tricked my whole family into it under the guise of a holiday gift. I gave all the adults in my family Ancestry.com kits a few years ago for the holidays, and my dad surprised me right back with giving my sister, brother-in-law, and I 23andMe kits. So I've taken them both. My results are very unsurprising. The graphic was like Ashkenazi Jewish and Ashkenazi Jewish and Ashkenazi Jewish. Like I'm pretty Jewish, and so no surprises. Everyone who was supposed to show up on the family tree showed up.
Yep. I love it. I love it. Last question. How have these strange times influenced the way you write? Have they reinforced your pre-2020 writing philosophy, or have they changed it?
I think that it has. I know a lot of people have struggled. For me, like the lack of a social life, because I'm usually very busy, like socially, also going to a lot of concerts and going out with friends.
Yep.
And I think that I've been able to take the time and using it. And I don't know if it's changed that much. I do think that this past year has been all about collaborations, and I don't think that they would have happened if not for the pandemic, because everybody had time. Like Stephen, he would have been on the road, and it would have been really difficult to like collaborate on a first draft of a book together. And so I think that I'm a big believer in silver linings, and I think that my writing, I don't know if it's changed, but I've definitely been able to focus on it the past year.
Cool. I love it. Everyone go pick up Little Pieces of Me, preferably from your local independent bookstore or one of the independent bookstores we've talked about here. I want to say thank you to our producer, Julie Gerstenblatt, who's been moderating the socials as well. And a special thank you to Alex Hoops and Amanda Smiley, who have been helping on the social media end. Thank you to you, Alison. Thank you to our Mighty Blaze community here for joining in. Thank you all for chatting and participating. Congratulations again on Little Pieces of Me. Any parting words for our crew?
Just thank you. I think that the community, the Mighty Blaze community, and on Instagram, it has been just such a joy. Both my books came out during the pandemic, and so I've missed out on some of the typical like author experiences. And you all warm my heart, and I love all the interactions. So thank you for doing what you do. And if you have a book club and want to read the book, I'd love to join you.
Yes. Oh yeah. Book clubs. Hit up Alison, invite her along, and maybe everybody can reveal their DNA results. Yes. That would be like a fun book club activity if you all open the emails at the same time with your DNA profile. Yes. Congratulations again, Alison. I'm Jenna Paone with A Mighty Blaze. We'll be here next week. Actually, next week I have an extra special interview at 4 p.m. on Thursday. I'll be on A Mighty Blaze's Authors in Conversation to talk to Elisa Friedland about her new book, Last Summer at the Golden Hotel. And next Friday at noon, we have Emily Henry, I believe, to talk about people we meet on vacation. So everyone join us again next week. And thank you again, Alison. Congratulations on Little Pieces of Me.